Here's a technique that has become one of my all-time favorites, especially across the northern states where I'm from in Wisconsin, but has also become a pretty big producer in the Minnesota area as well, and that is swim jig fishing. Now, swim jig fishing, there's so many different ways that you can fish a swim jig. You can throw it in shallow wood, you can throw it in heavy grass, pads, hydrilla, milfoil, you name it. There's so many different ways to go about fishing a swim jig, but this is how I personally like to do it. Let us know in the comments below for part 2 on how we like to set up fishing a swim jig. Now, the way that I go about fishing a swim jig, I'm very confident in using it in shallow water, so that's in, let's call it 4 feet or less, and I like to fish it around different types of cover, whether it's hard cover like docks. You can skip a swim jig under docks. It's really effective there. I also do like to fish it in laydowns, especially on the rivers. That's a really big producer for me. You can also fish the swim jig around more like sparse patches of grass where it doesn't get too heavy and the fish can drag you in and get leverage on you. But so when picking out a rod, one of my all-time favorites over a number amount of years that I've been using for fishing a swim jig is not an expensive one, because you don't need an expensive one. You're fishing it around, sparse pieces of cover. You're not fishing it on the bottom, so you don't need a sensitive blank by any means. All you're really needing is something to detect a bite with and get a good hook set in. For me, a big player has been the St. Croix Bass X. This is the 7-1 medium heavy fast action. This is a very budget-friendly rod. It's got a ton of backbone in it, and I feel like with a 7-1, I can make really precise casts with it if I'm flipping under docks or skipping into laydowns. This thing has been an absolute killer for me, and I really do feel like my hookup ratio on this is significantly higher. So anything around that 7 foot to 7.3 range is gonna do the trick. For me, it's a 7-1 Bass X. I really love this rod. When I'm looking to pick out a reel, I usually like to go for a reel that's around the 7-to-1 gear ratio. I feel like it's a good combination of a reel that's not too slow, but also doesn't have too much speed on it where I'm gonna fish the jig too fast. So for me, this could be a controversial take, but I like the Lew's Pro SP. So this reel is originally designed to be used for pitching and skipping applications, hence the SP, skipping and pitching, but it's kind of a sleeper with how much line it actually holds. So you can actually put quite a bit of line into this reel, and it really makes, skipping a swim jig under a dock or into a laydown so much easier, especially, you're not gonna get nearly as bad of a bird's nest if you make a bad skip by any means. It's a 7.5-to-1 gear ratio, so it's right in the wheelhouse of what I'm looking for, and it's truly become a favorite for a lot of my all-around fishing techniques. I mean, the only way I wouldn't use this is if I'm, say, throwing a deep crankbait, but for just about anything else, you can fit a lot of line on here and you can do just about anything with it. So number 1 pick is gonna be the Pro SP. So if you're not comfortable going down the shallower spool like the SP, one of my next best favorites is gonna be the Lew's Custom Light. And this is one of my favorite reels for doing just about any type of fishing, but especially with a swim jig, it's nice to have a nice light reel. It's very compact, it fits really well in the hand. It's a 7.5-to-1 gear ratio, which is also right in the wheelhouse of what I like to look for when throwing this type of an application. It's got 20 pounds of drag. You're gonna have a ton of leverage on the fish, and it's just an all-around awesome pick for a reel to pair with the Bass X. So these are the 2 reels I like to use. There's obviously plenty of different ways you can go about it, but these 2 are my absolute favorite. Now, when I am trying to get a line together, for 90% of the swim jig fishing that I like to do, I like to pick anywhere from a 15 to a 17-pound fluorocarbon. This right here is Seaguar Abrazex. I really like the Abrazex because it's a lot tougher of line. It does come at a little bit higher of a price point, but for fishing around docks and laydowns, it's really key to not constantly get nicks in your line, so you're not having to retie all the time. It's very strong line. It's very sensitive also. So Abrazex is gonna be my number 1 go-to for that. Now, if I were to say, go down a little bit more of a finesse setup for a swim jig, then I'll change my line size also. So if I feel like the fish are really pressured, or if I'm fishing cleaner water, I'm not afraid to go down to a 12-pound line. So this is 12-pound J fluoro. 12-pound is plenty strong to fish a finesse swim jig. You know, you can still get a good hook set in them, but you also don't have to worry about breaking off or anything of that nature. So finesse setups, I'll go down to the 12. Now, when I actually go to pick out the swim jig itself, my number one pick for 95% of the fishing I'm gonna do is the Dirty Jig swim jig. I do like to rotate in size, so most of the time I'm gonna start with a 3/8. It seems to be a good size for the cadence that I fish a swim jig at initially. I like to keep it in a pretty natural color, so anything of like a bluegill nature. For just about anywhere I fish, bluegill is gonna be my number one pick. So when I'm fishing around an area where I feel like a 3/8 is too big and I need a downsize, I also like to go to the 1/4 ounce. So this is the same Dirty Jigs swim jig, just in a 1/4 ounce. This one right here is chartreuse shad, especially like when I'm fishing in a river system. I like to sometimes go to more of a shad color if I'm around some sort of bait fish. But if I'm in, you know, if I'm fishing for the main forage being bluegill, whatever, I'll go to the bluegill color. But I really do like the 1/4 ounce for just anytime I need to switch up my presentation. I can put a little bit smaller of a trailer on this thing as well. So those are the two that I like to use 90% of the time. So when I want to go down to a more finesse presentation and just give the fish a little bit different look, that's when I reach for something like the Lethal Weapon. This is the 1/4 ounce swim jig. Yes, it's the same size as the Dirty Jigs, but it's got a lot lighter of a hook, and it's got a lighter skirt in it too. So this is really awesome for a finesse application. It pairs well with 12-pound fluorocarbon. You're not gonna, you know, pull on them too hard to where you're gonna bend the shank of the hook or anything like that. So they come in some awesome colors as well. This is the sunfish color. Like I said, I love to keep them very natural. So sunfish or any type of bluegill presentation, especially in the north, is gonna be my go-to. Last but not least, when I wanna pick out a swim jig trailer, I usually keep it very simple also. This is not a very complicated technique, as you can tell, but I either go down the boot tail swim bait path or some sort of a craw type path. Both obviously can imitate either a bait fish or any sort of a bluegill, panfish presentation, whatever it might be. If I'm gonna fish, say the finesse presentation, like the Lethal Weapon, that's where I'm gonna pair it with like a 3.3 inch Kitech. This is the Swing Impact Fat, also in the Sungill color. These two look amazing together, I can promise you that. It's just nice to have a smaller sized swim bait trailer to go with something like this. Obviously you can cut it down also to give it a little bit more of a compact look, but these two go to, especially when you're trying to, you know, give a more natural look to your bait. Now for most of the other swim jig fishing that I'm gonna do that's not finesse, I will tend to either put a craw style trailer on my swim jig. This is the Crush City Cleanup Craw. This is Green Pumpkin Magic. It's a really natural looking craw, and it can be rigged, you know, horizontal where the appendages are going like this, or you can have it going like this. Either way, I think it's a very natural look to the swim jig, and it can definitely, you know, make it look like a bluegill swimming away or whatever it might be. It's also really good for skipping. Having a flatter bottom makes it easier, especially to skip into laydowns or boat docks, whatever it might be. So that's when I really like to go with the cleanup craw. Now, if I'm fishing more of like a bait fish color or a shad pattern, whatever it might be, I like the Strike King Rage Swimmer. This is the 3.75 inch, so it is a little bit bigger of a profile, but I like to keep my color selection pretty simple. This is Pearl Flash. So once again, I'm just trying to imitate some sort of bait fish. And oftentimes with smallmouth, they just need to be able to see it, and they're gonna come take a look at it and more than likely eat it most times. So this is how I like to fish a swim jig. Like I said, there's so many different ways to go about this, but if you wanna get started and you're fishing in the north, around rivers, you know, lakes, whatever, small patches of grass, laydowns, docks, consider giving some of this a try. Obviously, let us know in the comments below if you wanna see a part 2 to another way of setting up a swim jig for heavier cover, whatever it might be. Let us know. We want to hear from you. Until then, get out there, get on the water, put these to use, and go catch them.